Afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, so Accelerate Action Women in EU Projects. My name is Anya Whelan and I'm an EU Projects Officer with the Southern Regional Assembly. I also facilitate the European Territorial Cooperation, or the ETC network, for the Southern region. For those of you who are new to our webinars, the ETC network is a platform for EU project officers, particularly those working on European territorial cooperation or Interreg projects, as well as anyone interested in EU programmes and funding. The network provides a space to connect, share experiences and learn from one another, with a focus on projects and opportunities within the Southern region. First, I'd like to wish you all a happy belated International Women's Day. It fell on a Saturday this year, so always nice when it falls on a weekend. I hope you all had an opportunity to celebrate, acknowledge and reflect on the day. This year's International Women's Day theme is Accelerate Action. Focusing on the need to accelerate action emphasises the importance of taking swift and decisive steps to achieve gender equality. It calls for increased momentum and urgency in addressing systematic barriers and biases that women face, both in personal and professional spheres. International Women's Day has its roots in the early 20th century, when women across Europe and beyond mobilised for better working conditions, the right to vote and greater participation in society. Over a century later, the European Union continues to champion these values, with gender equality embedded in its founding principles and reflected in EU policies and funding programmes. EU projects can play a role in achieving these principles, creating opportunities, supporting communities, and shaping policies across Europe. And that's why today's discussion is so important. We'll be looking at the role of women in EU projects, their contributions, and the way in which funding can support greater inclusion and impact. Just a couple of housekeeping comments before we get started. So this webinar will last for 1 hour and it'll include a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the 3 presentations. As a participant, your microphone is muted and your camera is turned off during the event. If you do have any questions for our speakers, please use the Q&A function. So you'll see the tab there at the top of your screen. We'd ask you to use this rather than the chat, as it just helps us keep track of all the questions and ensure that they're addressed during the Q&A. We'll be moderating the Q&A and approving your questions as they come in, but feel free to submit yours at any time and I'll present them to our speakers during the Q&A. So we're very lucky to have 3 fantastic speakers with us today. We have Dr. Katrina Strain, who is General Manager with EARNACT. We have Samantha Richardson, who is the DISC Project Manager with the Southern Regional Assembly. And we have Emily Nelson, who is Programmes Manager at the Wheel. So we hope that today's discussion spark meaningful perspectives and may even lead to future collaborations as well through the ETC network. So we'll get started with our first speaker. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Katrina Strain. Katrina is, as I said, the General Manager at EARNACT. She's an expert in European, transnational, interregional and cross-border project and programme management. She specialises in stakeholder engagement, knowledge transfer and fostering international partnerships, particularly in the areas of digital and energy technology, smart cities, low carbon transitions and regional development. She holds a doctorate from Queen's University Belfast School of Law, a master's and bachelor's degree in computer science from Ulster University, and additional qualifications in human resources and operations management. Katrina is also a registered Prince 2 practitioner and a member of the Chartered Governance Institute. Before joining EARNACT, she worked in various ICT roles in the private sector, including at IBM UK. Today, Katrina will be presenting the results of the EARNACT Women in European Cooperation Project Survey, a study that explores the experiences and challenges and obstacles faced by women working in EU projects. And Katrina will talk about how these can be addressed. So Katrina, I'll stop sharing my screen now and I'll share your presentation. So just hang on 1 second. There we go. Perfect. So that should come up there in a moment. So, Katrina, I'll leave you kick off, and you can just let me know when you want me to go on to the next slide, okay? Unmute there, Katrina. So if you just unmute yourself there.
Sorry. Thanks very much, Anya, for that and for the introduction as well. So I'm going to talk about Women in European Cooperation Projects. It was a study that we did in 2021 for ERNIC's 30th anniversary. And so I'm just going to chat about the findings and the challenges and recommendations that came out of that survey. So if you want to go to this next slide, Anya. So as I said, we carried it out for our 30th anniversary. And the sort of reasoning behind it was that 75% of our workforce were female. There was no existing studies that we could find really on this area and women working on EU cooperation projects. And EU cooperation projects, they involve a lot of traveling and things, and sometimes you're alone and arriving into different countries and airports late at night, and there's like the kind of safety considerations and things that go along with all of that. The survey was distributed to our ERNIC network, so our European network, and also to the EU project partners that we had in the various projects that we were involved in. We also distributed to the managing authorities and the secretariats for the European funding programmes as well. It looked at three key areas, and I'll discuss them later, but they were looked at gender balance, gender discrimination and professional conduct, and also travel support and safety. So those were the three main areas that we looked at. There was 592 responses received from 44 different countries, and we followed it up then with a workshop that was supported by DG Research and Innovation within the European Commission. They kindly supported that and the follow-up workshop as well. So if you want to go to the next slide, Anya. So the responses were received, 44% of those who responded worked in public authorities around the EU. 29% worked in universities and research organisations. 14% were from community organisations or non-governmental organisations, and then 13% were from others. And I have just listed there the kind of the breakdown of the different countries and all there as well. If anybody, we'll distribute these slides afterwards too, if anybody wants to look at it further. So the next slide. So the first one was about gender equality, and the findings of that were that 96% of the respondents believed that EU project managers were likely to be female, but that figure dropped then to 77% when they were asked if if the project manager was involved in a lead partner role. So if the project manager was taking on the lead partner role, 77% felt they would be female. Then also the survey also revealed that women were more expected in the admin heavy roles within projects. So, for example, communications 99% and cost claim management 94%. 11% believed that it was very likely for women to be very likely for women to be in senior management roles, and 49% believed women would be involved in technical roles. Political roles turned out that it's still very male dominated, and 51% support gender equality targets on project committees, and 49% opposed gender specific equality targets on committees. So the next slide, please. Then the second section then that we looked at was gender discrimination and professional conduct. And the findings from that were that 58% of the respondents reported experiencing sexism or gender bias in EU meetings at one point or of time or at different times. 48% experienced rude, unprofessional or offensive language and behaviour while involved in EU project meetings. 36% did not feel encouraged to participate in the discussions within the meetings, and 26% have felt uncomfortable or unsafe due to other partners' behaviour at social events like dinners and things like that during EU project meetings. And then the findings supported a code of conduct to set clear expectations in the EU projects, and I'll talk about that a bit later. So if you could move on to the next section. Yeah, so the third area that we looked at was travel support and safety concerns. And 68% of the respondents had to arrange additional family care when they were travelling for EU project meetings for either they had carer responsibilities, or they had children, or other types of responsibilities that meant they couldn't travel unless they arranged additional family care. Only 13% reported that they received time before or after travel to manage domestic responsibilities. And 50% of respondents said that domestic duties discouraged them for travelling in EU projects because they just didn't have the support there to undertake it. 52% felt unsafe in airports, buses, or train stations at some point or other, and 59% felt unsafe walking around the host cities. 90% felt the host region or partner should provide recommended travel and hotel information in advance, so that they could feel safe when they arrived in those areas, and that they knew where they had to go, and that the hotel had been actually vetted by the host partner. 71% would prefer the host themselves to organise transport from the airport to the hotel, and from the hotel back to the airport for them, whenever they were travelling for EU project meetings. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So we then asked as well the respondents their view and their own employer support, and what support was given to them, for EU related travel. 70% said they would like to see guidelines adopted by their employers in relation to EU travel, and 73% would like to see an EU projects women's forum established, and then 53% would like to see an EU project work included in their employers' health and safety policies. So the next slide, please. So then the recommendations that came out of that, the survey, everything was collated, and we produced a report and analysed the results and all. And then we had a follow-up workshop hosted and supported by the EU Commission. And the recommendations that came out was to adopt a code of conduct for EU projects, then to have mandatory gender bias and professional conduct training for partners involved within EU projects, and employer support for work-life balance, so flexibility, childcare, and care support and whatever for people that have to travel on EU projects, and the host organisations to provide clear travel information and safe transport options for people when they're making their travel arrangements and all, because obviously they reside in that area, and they know the hotels and the travel routes. Then also an EU projects women's forum to address any ongoing gender related concerns. The next slide, please, Anya. So in Ireland ourselves, we developed a code of conduct arising out of that, because we're involved in a number of EU projects. Like at present, we have 11 projects ongoing. So there's staff travelling regularly to EU project meetings, and so we developed our own code of conduct that we have in-house. And when we start a new project, we get all partners to sign up to that code of conduct to say that they're happy to agree to that there. And so some of the things that is included within that code is that we always treat all team members with respect and courtesy. We communicate respectfully through all means, should that be email, calls, video conference, in person, or whatever. We're considerate of each other's time and travelling to and participating in meetings. We think before speaking. listen with open minds when other people are speaking, and when necessary, challenge the problem and not the person. And we take ownership of the project, participate in discussions and decision making, and we work together to ensure a successful outcome. So we get everybody to sign up to that code of conduct at the outset, at the kickoff meeting, and just to make sure that everybody is aware of what is expected, and that that they're required to respect each other and listen to each other's opinions and things like that. Next slide, please. So then the other thing that came out of it, and that we also adopt here in ERNECT, because we have to organise a lot of meetings, and we're also working with a lot of other projects that organise meetings, is to have safe travel guidelines for people. So before, we would confirm the location and date for the event with all project participants well in advance of the meeting, and to try and avoid travelling during national holidays or during the weekend, so as to not kind of impinge too much on people's private lives and their carers' needs and things like that there. Conduct an assessment to determine the best location for the event and the accommodation. So we always recommend have a preferred hotel list. We recommend the hotel beforehand, and if possible, we would meet them at the, like, should it be the train station, the airport, or whatever, or give them provide information on how people could travel from the airport and whatever to that hotel. Provide comprehensive event program package to include the location of the event, the hotel, the agendas for the meeting, any travel arrangements and how to get from the airports and whatever, and if there was any specific safety warnings or things like that there. A member of staff will be appointed to meet the participant on the first day before at the hotel or whatever, and to answer any questions. And then we'll always send them a number or something of a staff member, so that if there's any emergency when they were in the area, that they had a point of contact that they could get, so that they could contact one of us if anything cropped up or anything happened, so that we can help them. And maintain an up-to-date register of all the participants. So we would get their travel plans, find out their hotel, when they're going to arrive, what time they're going to depart, and also get a mobile number so that we can contact them if we need during when they're traveling. And then provide the details for traveling from the hotel to the event and all. So what we do, if possible, we always try and arrange the transport for them from the hotel to the event and back and so forth. And then next slide, Anya. So safe travel for participants. Then we've also got like a code of conduct, or a code for participants as well, to communicate with the event host and such things like that there. So with every employer that's different. We have our own in ERNECT as well, and that's what we abide by all staff, to make sure that everybody's safe and that we can get in contact with them if anything happens to them during their time traveling and things like that there. And I think that's it, Anya, if you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's everything. That's a very brief run through of the survey. Now, that survey was conducted in 2021, and we have been discussing in here, because it's coming to the end of this programming period, we've been discussing about rerunning that survey to find out if there's been any updates or any changes in the meantime in those last 4 years, 3.5 to 4 years. So we're hoping to do that survey again and maybe relaunch it for next year. And I'll keep you all posted on the results, and also maybe through Anya send you out the link so that you could participate in the survey as well.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Katrina. It was really interesting. And I think definitely, especially coming to the end of programming periods for many of these funding programs, it would be very interesting to see, you would hope that there would be some positive changes in some of those statistics, but it's very important data and information to get. Lorraine has popped a link in the chat there if anyone would like to have a read of that report afterwards. And definitely, I think at the time in 2021, it was circulated with the E2C network and there were contributions made. So we'd be definitely delighted to circulate that again. So thank you very much for that, Katrina. And just as a reminder, if people have any questions in relation to Katrina's presentation, if you click on that Q&A option at the top, you can pop it in and then we can put it to Katrina at the end. So thank you very much for that, Katrina. So our next speaker is Samantha Richardson. So Samantha is the project manager of Developing Irish Sea Cooperation, or DISC, a 2-year Peace Plus project, a bit of a mouthful, Peace Plus project led by the Southern Regional Assembly. DISC is working with key partners, including the Executive Office, the Welsh Government and the Scottish Government, to explore opportunities for future cross-border cooperation between Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. Through this work, the project will develop a strategy and action plan to support future collaboration between these regions. Samantha brings diverse experience in EU cross-border project and programme management across both the public and third sectors, making her well placed to share insights into what it takes to lead an EU-funded project. Today, Samantha will be speaking about her experience of leading an EU project through insights from the DISC project. So I'll stop sharing my screen there now, Samantha, and hand over to you.
Thank you, Anya. Okay. Just share my screen. Now, are we right?
Perfect, Samantha.
Lovely, thank you. So thank you, Anya. I was delighted to be invited to present today. Not only do I get the chance to spread the word about the Developing Irish Sea Cooperation project, but it also provided me with an opportunity to reflect on what it is like as a woman leading an EU project. I'd like to say I found the results of the ENACT survey that Katrina presented were eye-opening, but honestly, they were no surprise to me. I can relate to pretty much all of those experiences, as I'm sure most women can. So it's great to see great work being put into that area. So well done, Katrina and her team. And Anya, I would like to thank you for the opportunity today for the reflection and the chance to share my message with you today. Okay, so I'll start by introducing the project, and from now on I'm going to call it DISC as I've only got 10 minutes. DISC is supported by Peace Plus, a programme managed by the Special EU Programmes Body. And Peace Plus is a cross-border programme supporting commitments made to peace and prosperity under the Good Friday Agreement to communities across the core programme areas of Northern Ireland and the Irish border counties of Cavan, Donegal, Leitrim, Louth, Monaghan and Sligo. A Peace Plus is one of several programmes under the EU's cohesion policy, which seeks to reduce economic, social and territorial disparities. Now, it's unusual in that it's co-funded by the EU, the Government of Ireland, the UK Government and the Northern Ireland Executive, who are the devolved Government of Northern Ireland. Now, you might be wondering how the Southern Regional Assembly ended up as the lead of a Peace Plus funded projects. Well, under previous programmes, projects were restricted to being in the core areas only, but thankfully for this period, it was agreed to expand the reach and for the first time allow partners outside the core area. So where does the DISC project come from? Well, DISC is building on the legacy of over 30 years cooperation between the Southern Regional Assembly, the Executive Office Northern Ireland, Welsh Government and Scottish governments, who have a history of managing interregional and cross-border cooperation programmes together. There was Interreg 5A, which invested over €280 million supporting collaboration between Northern Ireland, the border counties and Western Scotland. There was the Ireland Wales programme, managed between the Southern Regional Assembly and Welsh Government, and which invested over €380 million. Now, the ending of these programmes is a massive loss for thousands of partnerships and collaborations built over 30 years. So we could sit here and mourn that loss, or we could embrace this as an opportunity to see how we can build on this rich legacy of cooperation and to devise a new strategy. A strategy shaped from deep engagement with leaders and citizens. So every ending makes space for a new beginning, and DISC is the project partner's response to shaping a new era of cooperation. So the project is allowing us to explore what future North-South and East-West cross-border cooperation could look like, and to develop a strategy and an action plan for rolling it out. We are focusing on 3 thematic areas: sustainable blue economy, innovation in health and life sciences, and communities and culture. And from the examples I've provided here, you can see the areas being explored are quite broad. There is so much potential for cooperation, and the need for it is more urgent than ever as the political world and our natural environments are becoming increasingly complex and changing at what feels like an ever increasing speed. It's clear that we need to work together across boundaries if we are to come up with approaches and solutions to some of these shared challenges. DISC is the first joint step between Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland towards that future. It's important that we capture the diversity of experiences and the range of perspectives, especially from those who have experience in and are interested in pursuing cross-border collaboration, like yourselves. We need to understand what your needs are and what do you see as the challenges and opportunities. So the project is holding 4 cross-border symposium events, 1 in each jurisdiction, and the symposiums are designed to facilitate in-depth explorations and the exchange of knowledge, ideas and experiences. Now, all the symposium events are going to be held in hybrid format, in person and online, to facilitate discussions between people from all 4 jurisdictions. The first symposium event is organised for Wednesday, the 21st of May in Belfast, and we'll be sending through the details of this through this network, so you are invited to attend if you can. Your contributions are really valued and needed to inform this new strategy. We're also putting together a steering committee of strategic and policy decision makers, ensuring the project aligns with and maximises national and regional policy goals. It's important to provide an informal and non-political space for open and free discussion and knowledge sharing at that high level, which is very rare. Finally, we'll also be conducting research on the legal and regulatory barriers and opportunities. So all of this provides the valuable input towards developing a strategy and action plan for cross-border cooperation between Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. And that, in a nutshell, is what the DISC project is all about. And if you would like to learn more, please go to the project webpage. I think Lorraine is posting a link in the chat. Or please feel free to contact me directly if you'd like to chat. So when Anya asked me to reflect on my experience of being a female project manager for the lead partner in an EU-funded project, I realised I'd never actually thought about that before. I have managed projects as a partner, but never as the lead. And they're definitely two very different experiences. As many of you will know, the lead partner is responsible for all of the coordination, the delivery, implementation, planning, representing partners, the legal aspects, claims and expenditure verification, and all the challenges that come along with that. And most importantly, also responsible for decision making and for leading. And while it's not my first time in a leadership role, this one is very different. And this learning curve pretty much sums up my experiences so far. When I started thinking about it, my instinct was to say that it's not harder being a woman. But when I hear and remember other women's experiences, the evidence is that it really is harder for women in positions of leadership and authority. These are two fantastic books, by the way, which I highly recommend. Mary Ann Seagart in The Authority Gap told a story of when President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, who was president between 1997 and 2011, which isn't that long ago, she led an official visit to the Vatican to meet the Pope. And she was in the audience room at the head of her delegation, about to be introduced to the Pope, when he reached out his hand straight past her, held out his hand to her husband, and asked him, "Would you not prefer to be President of Ireland rather than married to the President of Ireland?" Now, her husband knew better than to take the pontiff's hand and to take the bait. So Mary McAleese reached over, taking the Pope's hand, which was hovering midair, and said, "Let me introduce myself. I am the President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, elected by the people of Ireland, whether you like it or whether you don't." Now, the Pope later claimed it was a joke. But the question is if male heads of state are automatically respected, then why not a female one? Every woman I know has a story to tell of not being taken seriously, of being patronized, talked over, ignored, and generally not being taken as seriously as a man would. This is what Mary Ann Seagart calls the authority gap. And research shows that we expect women to be less expert than men, and we are not taken as seriously, respected, or listened to. 70% of men rate men more highly than women for achieving exactly the same goals. Now, interestingly, the book also shows how this unconscious bias is just as strong in women as it is in men. Once we have learned to see the world in a particular way, we may not even be aware of our subliminal prejudices. As long as we allow boys to grow up believing that they are superior to girls, we are instilling habits of mind that are very hard to change later in life. Now, both of these books are great reads. They're solid page turners, but they do come with a health warning for high levels of frustration. So when I reflected on my own experiences of being in positions of leadership, I can definitely relate to this. And while I am working on it, I recognize that I don't have the same level of confidence that my male colleagues seem to have. And that's probably down to a combination of factors. Definitely from being told at school not to get ideas above my station and that I was better suited to being a hairdresser, or if I was really lucky, I might get a job behind the counter at Debenhams. And experiences like that really do shape you. And when I look back at my career, I can see that I have been hampered by lack of self-confidence and maybe something to do with the authority gap too. So Is female leadership different to that of male leadership? When I thought about this, and for me, it is. I feel it's the polar opposite of what we see as the traditional form of leadership, one that is hierarchical and as a race to the top, dominating others to be the best. And perhaps even now, many women, to be successful, have adopted the traditional male approach to leadership. But the problem for women, as Mary Ann Sieghart shows in The Authority Gap, is that we are often punished by both men and women for being too assertive, too dominant, too pushy, and too talkative, traits that are both admired and rewarded in men. I think it's really important that we do our best to recognize any biases that we might have on that. So for me, female leadership is different. It's about nurturing, it's about supporting. And we should all start by nurturing ourselves. As women, we are often too busy looking after everyone else that we do forget about ourselves. We need to learn to identify our own needs first. And what is it that you want? And then you can commit yourself to nurturing that. Only then can we truly support others with an open heart. Now, I'd like to end with this powerful quote. A strong woman knows she has strength enough for the journey, but a woman of strength knows it is in the journey where she will become strong. So thank you all for listening, and I wish you all well.
That was excellent. Thank you very much, Samantha. And I think we could all, in particular, relate to that graph that you had when it comes to being involved in any project. You feel those range of emotions and those things around confidence. So thank you very much. That was great to get an overview of the project, but in, I suppose, the context of this webinar, very interesting to hear your experience of being a woman leading a project. So thank you very much for that. So, our final speaker today is Emily Nelson. Emily is the European Programmes Manager at The Wheel, where she leads the Access Europe programme, which is a support and capacity building initiative designed to help the community and voluntary sector access and manage EU funding. Her role involves researching EU funding opportunities relevant to the sector, coordinating and delivering training and events on EU funding, and assisting organisations in building relationships with potential EU project partners. Today, Emily will be speaking on accelerating action, EU funding as a catalyst for gender equality in Ireland, and exploring how EU funding can drive positive change and create opportunities to advance gender equality. So I leave you share your screen there, Emily. And just while you're doing that, I'll just give another reminder, just if people do have questions, to pop them into the Q&A, and we'll have our Q&A session now once after Emily's presentation. So thank you very much, and over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily. Just trying to pull this up here. Sorry.
Take your time, no worries.
Great, here, I think I have it here. Just waiting for it to load.
Yep, that's perfect,
Great.
Emily.
Great. Yeah, so just give me a shout if there's anything wonky. Okay, yeah, thanks again, Anya. It's great to be here. It's great to hear from Samantha and Katrina about their respective initiatives as well. Yeah, so my name's Emily. I'm the European Programmes Manager at The Wheel, and The Wheel is Ireland's national association of community and voluntary groups and social enterprises. So as Anya mentioned, within The Wheel, I manage a program called Access Europe, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later and the specific services that we offer. But for now, I'm going to take you through EU funding as a catalyst for equality and highlight some specific examples of EU-funded projects that promote gender equality here in Ireland. All right, so jumping right in, how does EU funding contribute to gender equality in the EU and Ireland? So EU funding programs and their objectives and priorities are informed by EU policy. And the European Pillar of Social Rights plays a very key role in shaping those policies. If you're not familiar with it, the European Pillar of Social Rights is an initiative by the EU that's aimed at strengthening social rights and promoting fair working conditions, equal opportunities, and social inclusion across the member states. And you can see from this graphic here that it has 20 principles. And principle number 2 is gender equality. So the European Pillar of Social Rights essentially provides the framework and the legal backing for gender equality initiatives like the EU's Gender Equality Strategy for 2020 to 2025. So taking a little closer look at that specific strategy, one of the overarching goals of the Gender Equality Strategy is a gender equal Europe by 2025. I don't think we're quite there yet, but there are still 9 months to go in the year, so we'll see. But you can see here what the other kind of priorities of the strategy are. So I've listed them on the slides, but it's ending gender-based violence through combating domestic violence and harassment, challenging gender stereotypes through promoting women's roles in STEM and leadership, closing the gender pay and pension gaps, achieving gender balance in decision-making in areas like politics and industry, and promoting work-life balance and better parental policies. So that's sort of the policy side of things. And then the role of EU funding programs is to support and advance these policy objectives by investing in actual projects that promote things like women's economic empowerment and violence prevention. So now we'll take a look at some of those programs and then specific project examples. So first up, we have SERVE. So that's the Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values Program. And this is the EU's biggest ever funding program for promoting and protecting fundamental rights and democracy inside the EU. So you can see here it has a pretty sizable budget of 1.55 billion euro for 2021 to 2027. And there are four strands to the SERVE program. So one that advances gender equality in particular is strand 2, which is the Equality, Rights and Gender Equality strand. And it has very specific calls for proposals each year. One of the calls is actually calls for proposals to promote gender equality. And there's also a specific funding call to tackle racism, xenophobia, and discrimination. So those two calls haven't yet been published for 2025, but keep an eye out if you're interested because they should be published in the next month or so. The other relevant strand of SERVE is strand 4, which is also referred to as Daphne. So Daphne is all about preventing and combating all forms of gender-based violence. And every year there is a call for proposals to prevent and combat gender-based violence and violence against children. And that's actually open now, and the deadline to apply is the 7th of May in case anyone's interested. So if you want to learn more about SERVE, you can click on the link in the slide. And now we'll take a look at an example of a SERVE project. So the example that I chose is the EASY project, which is short for It's Never Easy to Talk About This. And this was a SERVE project that the Immigrant Council of Ireland was a partner in. And the aim was to increase community engagement and raise awareness about and develop victim-centered support for victims of forced marriages. So again, if you click on this link, it'll take you to a page that covers their project activities in depth. And they really delivered like a very impressive amount and range of activities, but I've listed some of the key outputs here. So some of the things that they did were create a best practice booklet and customer journey map. They created and developed culturally sensitive victim-centered services and a toolkit for professionals to better identify and support the victims they're working with. So really great work being done through this project. And the other fantastic thing about it is that it looks like these methods and tools have been integrated into the Immigrant Council's ongoing work. So they've become a very sustainable resource for both the staff and their beneficiaries instead of just kind of a one-off project. So that's really great to see. The next program we're going to look at is ESF Plus, or the European Social Fund Plus. So this is the EU's main instrument for investing in people with the overall aim of building a more social and inclusive Europe. And you can see in the graphic some more kind of specific goals that they have. And just a callback to the start of my presentation. So ESF Plus finances the implementation of the principles from the European Pillar for Social Rights. And as you will recall, Principle 2 is gender equality. So the ESF Plus works a little bit differently in Ireland than it does in other EU member states. So here it's managed by the Irish government, and they kind of dole it out to different funding bodies, and they decide how it is sort of administered. So a lot of bodies like the ETBs and youth reaches, they get ESF Plus funding. So obviously very worthy organizations and causes, but the ESF Plus funding is not the most transparent here. And they generally don't have open funding calls for civil society organizations to apply directly to. However, back in 2016, the Department of Justice was managing ESF, and they did actually publish an open call for gender equality proposals. So there were two different strands that organizations could apply under. So there was strand A, which was women returning to the workforce, and strand B, which was women's entrepreneurship. So my project example is one of the projects that was successfully funded under women returning to the workforce. And that was delivered by one family. So they received $290,000 to deliver their project New Futures for Lone Parents. And the goal of that project was to develop and test pathways to progress 80 female lone parents into sustainable employment. And these were women that had been quite distant from the labor market initially. So throughout the lifetime of the project, they developed a course, and that course included a personal development program, parenting and family support services, and a bunch of accredited training around career planning and skills training like retail, ICT, and healthcare. And that's just a photo of some of the proud graduates there. And again, if you click on that link, you can see from one family's website that after the project ended, it was absorbed into their ongoing activities, and the course is still something that they offer on a regular basis. So again, a sustainable resource for the community. So Erasmus Plus is something that I'm sure most people here are familiar with. So it's the EU's program for education, training, youth, and sport. The budget of 26.2 billion euro, which was, I think, almost double the amount that it received in the previous EU budget. So a lot of investment here. One of Erasmus Plus's horizontal program priorities, so meaning across all of the different sort of like funding streams within Erasmus Plus, there's this horizontal priority of inclusion and diversity, meaning that when you are writing your application, you should really be embedding inclusive practices into your project design and your application. That's something that they'd want to see. So Erasmus Plus is particularly interested in funding projects that promote equality in learning and supporting exchanges and training that empower women and other underrepresented groups. And the project example that I chose is actually from one of the Wheels member organizations, Longford Women's Link. So they partnered with other EU organizations to deliver digital entrepreneurship for women, or DO, to address the underrepresentation of women in entrepreneurship in the EU labor market. So through that project, they developed this really great multilingual online platform. And the platform has training resources and tutor guides and digital badges that are all around supporting female entrepreneurs. And if you click on the link, it'll take you to the online platform and you can avail of all those resources for free. And they also have a bunch of webinars on the project website about their methodology and how to sort of effectively use their platform so you can get the most out of it. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that for some inspiration. And then the last program I wanted to highlight is Horizon Europe. So that's the EU's funding program for research and innovation, has a massive budget of 95.5 billion euro. So they promote gender equality by funding initiatives aimed at increasing the number of women in STEM careers. Horizon Europe also encourages gender mainstreaming in research projects and promotes women's overall participation in R&D. So having a gender equality plan in place is an eligibility criterion for certain categories of organizations participating in Horizon Europe projects. And gender balance among research teams is set as a ranking criterion for Horizon Europe proposals. And then the other thing that they've been doing is trying to increase gender balance throughout the program overall by having a target of needing at least 50% women on Horizon Europe related boards, expert groups, and evaluation committees. So an example of what their sort of gender equality promotion looks like in action is the European Prize for Women Innovators. So that's funded by Horizon Europe. So this is an annual competition that celebrates the women responsible for Europe's most groundbreaking innovations. And Ireland has actually been doing very well over the last few years in the competition. So in 2022, Dr. Ciara Clancy is the founder and CEO of Beats Medical. She won in the Women Innovators category. And Niamh Donnelly, the co-founder and CRO of Akara Robotics, won in the Rising Innovators category. So again, if you click on the link, you can learn more about those women and their projects. And then this year, there are 2 Irish women among the 19 semifinalists for the prize. So there's Rona Tower, who's the co-founder of Leos, a company that developed Sound Bounce, which is a smart acoustic material. She's been shortlisted under the Women Innovators category. And then Elizabeth McLaughlin is the co-founder and CEO of Timpani Medical, and she has been shortlisted under the EIT Women Leadership category for Timpani's variable angle endoscopy technology, which improves patient and healthcare system outcomes. So the winners for the 2025 prize will be announced on the 3rd of April. So the best of luck to Rona and Elizabeth. So that is kind of it for the whistle-stop tour of EU funding programs that promote gender equality. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how funding programs can deliver on gender equality in Ireland. So let's say that you're interested in learning more about those programs, maybe applying to some of those funding calls yourself. That's where Access Europe comes in, and that is the program that I manage in the Wheel. So it is essentially a central hub for general EU funding advice. Kind of think of it as like your one-stop shop for all things EU funding. So it's funded by the DFA and delivered by us, obviously, in the Wheel. And we have 4 key services that we deliver in Access Europe. So the first is information and awareness raising. And the main way that we do that is through our free monthly Access Europe newsletter. So my colleague Christina and I spend an inordinate amount of time on EU Commission websites, kind of trawling through all the funding calls and selecting the ones that are most relevant for Irish civil society organizations. So we compile those all and put them in our free monthly newsletter that would go directly to your inbox. So we kind of taken the hard work out of looking for an appropriate funding call. So I definitely encourage you to sign up to the newsletter, and the link for that is in the slides. We also post all of those funding deadlines on our Access Europe website, where we have an EU funding guide that also kind of goes more into depth about the different programs that I've mentioned and other funding programs that are relevant to Irish civil society. So the other thing that we do is events and training. So we have a YouTube channel where we have all of our trainings recorded and posted there, and we do things kind of more general stuff like an introduction to EU funding programs to more of like a deep dive on how to build an effective EU partnership, and sort of more bespoke trainings where we focus on specific programs. Like we just did a whole series on SERV, for example, and we would usually do those in partnership with the national contact point for that program in Ireland, if there is one. So definitely encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. And again, if you sign up to our newsletter, we include all of our upcoming events in there, and they're all free, and you don't have to be a member of the Wheel to join any of those events. The other thing that we do is help desk support. So that's essentially my colleague Christina and I having Zoom calls with people and listening to their project ideas and offering advice and kind of signposting, that kind of thing. And so, you know, we can also do application review. And if you do get funded, then we can also help you to put project management supports in place. So we're basically going to hear from inception to the end of a project for however long you might need support. And then the last thing that we do is network building. So we help to facilitate opportunities for Irish organizations to connect with EU organizations through partner matchmaking events and through our partner database platform. So that's just what our website looks like, and I've hyperlinked it there so you can go and check it out, look at the EU funding guide, look at the open calls, get a sense of who we are and what we do. This is just a screenshot of the partner database platform that I mentioned. So basically you can create a profile on here that highlights your organization, shows like kind of what you do, what you're interested in terms of EU funding, the strengths that you would bring to a project, that sort of thing. And then you can use the link to reach out to potential partner organizations. So just a really good way to showcase your organization and how you might get involved, or what you might bring to an EU funded project and find partners. And then we also sort of shop or kind of promote this the database to our different EU networks to encourage them to invite Irish organizations into partnerships. So just a handy resource. And then this is just all the different ways that you can connect with us. We recently set up a LinkedIn page because we're trying to move away from X for various and obvious reasons. So definitely give us a follow there. We post all of our upcoming events and trainings there as well. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Emily. And we'll circulate the slides afterwards as well, so that I know you had your links embedded there, but just in case people weren't able to get them, you'll be able to access all of those links. And definitely I'd recommend linking in with the team and with Emily and her team in Access Europe, and also that that monthly newsletter is a brilliant resource as well. So I know we've got a little bit over time, but if people are okay to stay on maybe just 5 minutes after the planned end time, if that's okay, just that we do have a couple of questions in, so it would be nice to be able to address them. So if you haven't already, please do feel free to share your questions in the Q&A function. And I just invite Katrina and Samantha to turn their cameras on and unmute themselves there, if that's okay. So I'll go through, we have some of the questions here that have come through the Q&A. So the first one, Katrina, is for you. It says, "Hi Katrina, has there been any progress in the code of conduct, and what should be in an effective, what should an effective code include?"
Yeah, so as regards the code of conduct, we've developed one on Airnight, resulting from that survey, and we get every project meeting that we're involved in, we get all of the partnership to sign up to that code of conduct to say that they're aware of what their responsibilities are as regard respect and how they should conduct themselves in meetings and things like that, and about listening to people and challenging the problem rather than the person and all. So yeah, so we have implemented one, but in other organizations it hasn't happened so much. I am aware of some different organizations within our network that have implemented a code of conduct, but not them all. Now, some have integrated like gender equality principles and things into their policies, but there's no kind of universally applied code of conduct for people working within EU cooperation projects. And some of the things that came out of the survey was that there should be a clear definition of what the expected professional behaviour is within the project partnership, and that would include inclusivity, respect, non-discrimination, and things like that there. That there would be a commitment to the gender equality issues as regards leadership, decision making, and participation. That there would be a mechanism for reporting and addressing misconduct as well within the projects, so that anybody that had wanted to raise concerns, that they would have a method of reporting that, and also that the different partners should take into account work-life balances as well as regards organising meetings. So like if you have to travel to the top end of Finland, that you wouldn't have the meeting at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, because it's normally takes a full day traveling, and to kind of minimise the time that people have to travel at weekends and things. So I know in Airnight, when we're organising EU project meetings, we always have them on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It would be very rare that we'd ever have a meeting on a Monday or Friday, and that's to accommodate people to be able to travel on those days and that they don't have to travel at the weekend. And also we also tie in, like if there's a lot of long traveling, that we would schedule the timing of the meeting as well to coincide with that. So maybe that they could leave early on the last day if they had to travel that day in order to get home for the next day and thing. So while we do have a code of conduct and we get people to sign up for it, and I am aware of some other organisations that have also adopted that. It's not universally adopted, as far as I know, in a lot of organisations.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Katrina. So the next one is actually again Katrina around the survey. So it says the survey results shared by Katrina are quite shocking. So it's fantastic to see the great work that's being done to combat these issues. Excuse me for a moment. My voice going against me. So they're saying for each of the speakers, is there experience that women, is it their experience that women aren't speaking out about these concerns? So yeah, so they're saying that they find it very interesting and that it's something that they haven't seen being discussed in projects before. So I don't know, maybe Samantha, did you want to comment on that one, or just from your own experience?
Thank you. Yeah, so the question was, what I do find interesting is that I always thought it was just me that felt this way, as it's never been just discussed during projects, and that's something I can relate to. It's not some, in my experience of projects, honestly, there's not really the time or the space, in which to talk about something like this, because you kind of do think it's all in my head. It's just me. It's just me, da 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 da. Because a lot of as Mary Ann Seagard in the book The Authority Gap, she points out, it's kind of hidden, it's in a look, or not being listened to, or you're in a meeting and it's mostly men, and you give your point across and then it's just swept over, and then it goes to the men who dominate the conversation, and then one of the men makes your point, and then everyone congratulates him. So it's those kind of things, and you, as a woman, you kind of sit there going, did that really just happen? Is that just in my head? So I think we should start talking to one another and sharing our experiences, and then perhaps we can have greater support and start standing up for ourselves.
Yeah, and I agree with Samantha. Yeah, like the survey kind of it revealed that the challenges faced by women in EU projects are not just isolated to a specific region, that they're widespread across all of the European regions, and so that women in all of the regions have kind of similar experiences, um, and and that women kind of, where men also have work-life balance problems, women kind of take on the burden of that, especially if they have children and things like that, that a lot of the burden of that falls to the woman. Um, and that was relevant across all of the regions we've seen. And sometimes we found too from this that a lot of women said they're afraid to speak up in the meetings because they don't want to sound like they're complaining or and things, and that maybe the meeting is dominated by men and they don't want to be, say, like where one woman had said that she had brought something up and she was told that, oh, you must have issues at home or something, and this is why you're complaining about this, where they wouldn't have said that if a man had brought the same point up. And so it seemed to be quite, like all of the regions experienced similar, while some regions were more better, and how they more better in kind of equal opportunities and having more balanced representation of women and men across all of the regions. All of the women had experienced the same sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of food for thought there. I have a question here actually for you, Emily. So someone is wondering, are there any current or upcoming funding calls that would support or on gender equality that you're aware of?
Yeah, so the specific ones that like actually name gender equality in the name of like the call for proposals, there is the SERVE one that I mentioned. So that's through that Daphne strand that's about kind of combating and preventing gender-based violence. So that's open right now. That's open till the 7th of May. And then the one that is probably going to be public, well, I would hope would be published in the next month or so, is the one through SERVE that's specifically around kind of anti-racism, anti-discrimination in the workplace, that kind of thing. So there's obviously also some crossover there for other kind of gender equality promotion activities. And as I mentioned, we kind of include all of those funding deadlines in the Access Europe newsletter. So if you're interested in kind of keeping an eye out for those things, and Access Europe newsletter is the best way to make sure you're staying on top of those opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. And we have a few other ones. So unfortunately, we can't get to all of them just with timing, but we can follow up afterwards. But just another one here from Joy. So great presentations. Thank you all for your work on this. A question for Samantha. Will there be an opportunity for good practice knowledge sharing on progressing gender equality in the upcoming DISC symposium events?
Great question, Joy. Lovely to hear from you. Will there be an opportunity for knowledge sharing, gender equality? I think for attendees, it probably won't be on the agenda, but the second half of the afternoon is all about engaging the experiences of the participants. So everyone in attendance will have the opportunity to highlight the issues and the areas in which they'd like to see future support for future cross-border cooperation. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thank you. muted myself there. So look, for those, thank you so much to Samantha, Katrina and Emily for your time today, for your presentations and for your insights there in the Q&A as well. We really appreciate it. For those of you who are not members of the ETC network, you can scan the QR code on your screen now to join. Lorraine is also going to put a link in the chat. So benefits of being a member include updates on EU programmes and funding calls through a monthly newsletter. We have events throughout the year, information sessions such as today's session, and targeted interactions linking local authorities, higher education institutes, SMEs and civil societies, particularly in the southern region. When you do sign up to the network, you'll be asked to enter keywords for your organisation, for your strategic priorities. So we would ask you to put some thought into those keywords, as we'll use them to find you if we're approached by an international consortium looking for an Irish partner in an area that's relevant to you. So look, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. So we went a few minutes over, so hopefully it didn't eat into too much of your afternoons, but thank you all for joining us. Again, a big thank you to our speakers, Katrina, Samantha and Emily, for sharing their knowledge and experiences. And a special thanks to my colleague Lorraine for her technical support, both in the lead up and throughout today's webinar. And I suppose just to say, like, while International Women's Day is one day in the calendar, the work towards gender equality is something that continues every day. Change happens through ongoing conversations, actions and commitments. And as we've seen today, through our speakers and their work and their experiences, EU projects and those involved in EU projects can play a role in driving that change. So I hope today's discussions has provided useful insights to take forward in your own work. And this session has been recorded, so the recordings and slides will be sent to you afterwards. And thanks again for being part of today. And I wish you a lovely rest of your day. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.